This is Cool Cat Teacher Talk, where we talk about what matters in the classroom. Hello, this is Vicki Davis with Cool Cat Teacher Talk, episode 10, where we will talk about thankfulness, gratitude, how to have it ourselves, and how to teach it to children.
Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching.
So there are certain times of year where we talk about being thankful or having gratitude. But do you know that having an attitude of gratitude throughout the year will make a positive difference in your happiness and in your life? That's why it's so important to cultivate a habit of gratitude. Now, it is not always easy, and it's also not always easy to teach it to children. So these are some things that I have grappled with throughout my life as a teacher and a mom of 3. But the research is astounding, and I'm going to share some things that I have collected in my book of thoughts. Many years ago, I learned from John Maxwell that he wrote down his favorite thoughts and quotes and stories on index cards to have them ready for a moment when he needed to share some truths. And today, you're getting the last 15 years of me developing that box. Bob Emmons, a professor of psychology at the University of California, is a leading researcher in the area of gratitude and author of the book, Thanks, How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happier. He believes that everyone should try practicing gratitude because the benefits are so powerful. And he named 3 of them. That the practice of gratitude can increase your happiness levels by 25%. Second, it's not as hard to achieve as you might think. A few hours writing a gratitude journal over 3 weeks can create an effect that lasts months, if not more. Some time ago, I had a struggle with gratitude, I think like all of us have. And I started keeping a gratitude journal and writing down 5 things a day every morning that I am so grateful for. Many years ago, Kip, my husband, and I discussed what we talked about at the end of the day. We found out that at the end of the day, we were basically giving a laundry list of everything that went wrong. And we didn't name anything that went right. So we made a commitment that when we saw each other, we would talk about some of the things that went right that day. We need to choose what we dwell upon and what we look at. And while we're accomplishing so much each day, why are we just picking the few things that went wrong instead of all the things that went right? The simple fact that we came home and that we're breathing and that we're in love with each other and have a home, these are things to be grateful for because none of that is guaranteed to last forever. So learning to focus on what you're grateful for as well with your children. When they come home from school, do you ask them what went right today? And of course you want to listen to the problems and the struggles of life, but here's an example I give my students. If I tell you to look for the color blue, suddenly you're going to see the color blue everywhere you look. But if I give you the color red, suddenly you'll see the color red everywhere you look. So if I tell you to look for the things that went right today, you're going to start finding more things that are right. The third thing that Emmons said was that cultivating gratitude brings other health effects such as longer and better quality sleep time. So I'll be sharing a lot of research on this show. So if you want to read the research for yourself, as I think you should, you can go to coolcatteacher.com/talk gratitude. Research by Dr. Fred Bryant, a professor at Loyola University, Chicago, it shows that those who regularly and frequently savor are happier, more optimistic, and more satisfied with life. And Bryant says that savoring is 3-fold, that you can savor the past by reminiscing. You could, at your Thanksgiving or Christmas event or birthdays, have a slideshow running or some old movies and savor the past by reminiscing. Savor the future through positive anticipation. Savoring the future is something I love to do. This is why I like to plan my vacations ahead of time. Now, I'm all in for spontaneous things sometimes, but if I'm going to have a big trip, I'd rather look forward to it for a year than for a month. That gives me a whole year of savoring and anticipating the future. And then we can savor the present by practicing mindfulness. We can just sit and look around us, listen to the people and look at their faces and know that this situation will never quite be the same again. Babies will be born and people will pass. That is part of life. But savoring the present, that's a present we give ourselves. And we're going to talk about how sometimes it's hard to savor or have gratitude. But savoring is such a part of life, and it's something that we can teach kids as well. In studies led by Dr. Martin Seligman, people have written gratitude letters to someone they've never properly thanked and seen immediate increases in happiness and decreases in depressive symptoms. Now let's learn about how one teacher has a powerful project to help kids show gratitude. This is episode 356 of the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, the Thank You Project. So today we're talking with Morgan Toll from New Jersey. She is entering her 12th year of teaching, and this year she's teaching 8th grade language arts. And Morgan, we want to talk about your Thank You Project. What is the Thank You Project?
The Thank You Project has developed over a number of years. Many years ago, when I was teaching high school, a student had made me a card to say thank you for something and signed their name by John Smith on the front of the card. And when I asked why, they said, well, that's where you put your name, on the front of a card. And it struck me as kind of silly, and I just kind of brushed it off. And a year later, I got something very similar where another student had written me something and again, signed their name on the front. And I thought, well, this is weird. And so kind of showed them how to write a thank you letter. It sort of morphed into that. And now it has become this massive end of the year, final culminating project for my students. Throughout the school year, they'll write various thank yous here and there. If it's guidance counselor week, we'll write a little message to their guidance counselor. Or we've had someone come into class and do something, we'll write a little thank you letter. But at the end of the year, I really challenge them to put into real life practice all of their writing skills. So all of those things we've practiced throughout the school year. We looked at anecdotes and stories. Well, now you get to actually write them in a real life example. They really just sort of run with it. They have a lot of autonomy over the project. There are some requirements, but they really, really just make it their own. And every year it gets a little bit bigger. And every year I let the students decide how are they going to put their own little spin on the Thank You Project.
Tell us who they're thanking. And we are going to share your document in with the show notes. So who are they thanking?
I do set up a bit of a requirement for them because if not, you'll get the same two people that get written to, and they sort of forget that in middle school, you have your 6th grade teachers and your 7th grade teachers, and it took you a long time to get to 8th grade. I have them thank teachers from 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, the administration, guidance counselors, and then this year, the past students that I had last year actually added in the bus drivers and lunch ladies, and they said, we really feel like they're not acknowledged enough. And so they came up with the idea to add them onto that list, which was a great thing to see and really shows that they might be 8th graders, but they are observant and they do notice people, and that being kind is not necessarily lost on this generation.
What happens when teachers and others receive these notes?
There's tears. There's always tears. A lot of the teachers now, the school that I'm in, this is going into my 6th year, and they have learned to take them home and read them because if they sit in school and read them, they tend to cry. A lot of it comes from, you don't realize the impact that you're making on some of them. And now it could be 2 years later, you had a student in 6th grade and they're writing to thank you for something that you did that no one else has done for them.
Wow. So what kind of impact does it have on the students?
They will say that it is when they come back to visit. The high school is right across the street. And very often I get numerous students throughout the school year come back to visit. And they will say that that is the one thing that really sticks with them. I had a couple that I had seen at their graduation from the high school this year. And they said they wrote a bunch of thank you letters this year, graduating as seniors, to some teachers, and were shocked. They couldn't believe the reaction that adults had over this tiny little handwritten note. And so when they see that impact, I think it really just kind of plants that seed that this is a way to show some kindness and some gratitude. And there are things that maybe we don't get to every day. They're not part of our curriculum. And it really does go with them as a lasting sort of lesson I can teach them.
Well, and the art of the handwritten note, some would say, is gone, but it's not gone for your kids, is it?
No. And when they learn about the PS, and we learn about adding things in at the end and how to craft these different paragraphs. And some students need a ton of scaffolding and they don't know where to begin. And so we'll build that in and we'll work on different mini lessons as they're going through it. But when they really kind of have that confidence that it's okay to sort of make my own spin on this, that they really do blossom as writers for this little handwritten note. And they take some very long time to do it. I have a whole pile here with me. There are hand decorated envelopes with Harry Potter pictures on the outside because they know I'm obsessed with Harry Potter, and they put stickers on them, and they get to know our personalities as adults, and they really are able to show that connection.
At my previous school, I was finishing up there last year and I started at a new school, but I did get some thank you notes at the end of the year. And I think the opportunity to say thank you is important. I think some of the kids regretted that they hadn't said thank you sooner. I mean, it's tough because you don't want to look at it from a selfish standpoint and say, oh, all the teachers need a thank you note. However, I do think that gratitude is part of living a good life.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's amazing. Those quiet kids, the ones that don't say anything, the ones that you think, man, I really struggled to reach that kid all year, are the ones that they did notice the effort, and they do turn around and say, thank you for taking the time to help me find a voice. And they are grateful that you acknowledged, hey, I don't like to raise my hand and talk in class all day, but you found ways to let me be myself. So it is a very heartwarming exercise.
So Morgan, have you ever made a mistake as you're trying to guide through this project? Because you've been doing it for a while, so you've probably learned what not to do, right?
Yes. So we had one time where a student took sort of a passive-aggressive stab at a teacher for something that had happened. It is difficult when the kids are writing 14 and 15 letters apiece for me to make sure that every single word is okay. It does take a very long time for me to go through all of them. And between his rough draft and his final, he added a couple of sentences that were not the nicest thing to have said. He wasn't totally mean, but it was not the nicest thing to have been said. So now we have a big discussion over this is why you're doing this project. And if you don't have that nice thing to say, then just don't write to that person because they're never going to know.
Yeah.
So
you learned from that. Anything else?
Yes, it does take some time because I do require the students to handwrite the letters. So we spend all year using the computers and they're typing constantly, and their typing rate increases fantastic. But when it comes to actually handwriting the letters, it does take them a little bit of time.
Okay. So how long does it take because each kid is writing how many letters?
This year, they wrote, I believe it was 9 total letters. So I had about the final 2 weeks of class for them to do that. Now, our last 2 weeks involve graduation practice, and there's some half days in there. So we don't have our full class time, but I take about the last 2 weeks of school, and this is what I use for those last 2 weeks.
Awesome. What do you feel like you're teaching with this? I mean, obviously there's some handwriting and some letter writing. What are the pieces of the standards that you feel like you're covering?
I I really think that they're getting to that sort of expository writing, narrative writing for some of them. They're really getting that chance to make sure that their writing makes sense, that it is fluid, that everything has that sort of beginning, middle, and end. So we're looking at sort of the end of those writing standards where they have to be able to put it all together. Does your sentence structure make sense? Do you have correct grammar and usage? Because if this doesn't make sense to the person that's reading it, well, you sort of miss the whole point. It really forces them to slow down and to step back and to say, okay, I really need to look at the writing process and what I'm doing.
So Morgan, is there ever a time where you have students rewrite letters?
Oh, yes. They will start with one version and we sort of make a list of, okay, who do you think you want to write to in this category? So take a look at your 7th grade teachers. Who are 2 teachers that stand out? Well, I really only have one, but could I substitute in this 6th grade teacher and write it to an extra one? Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of flexibility for them. They'll sit down and they'll make their list. And then we start to recall some of those really fond memories. Why does this person stand out to you? How did they impact your education? It took a lot to get you to this end of 8th grade, this big step. You're transitioning to high school. How did these people impact you? And so we sort of make a chart, or they'll draw, or they'll brainstorm in some way. And then we kind of just run from there.
Do you ever have a case where you have teachers not getting thank you letters and you try to steer somebody in that direction? Or what do you do about that?
Honestly, they cover every subject area. There are some teachers might only get 1 or 2, and some teachers might get 57 letters. But I really want the kids to make that choice. I don't really want to impact them and say, well, you really should be writing to so.
I think that's a brave challenge. And I think that's because it's more authentic. The kids have chosen.
Yes, the kids have chosen. And there are, without a doubt, every year, there's one teacher that comes out on top with a huge stack of letters every year. It's somebody different every year, which I think is also interesting to see that this teacher had an impact on this collective group of students over the other teachers that they might have had. So, and now there are some of the other 8th grade teachers are also doing it with their students. So it really has kind of spread and run through the building where there's a large portion of the staff is getting letters.
At the peak of his career, it was said that every word that Rudyard Kipling wrote was worth 25 shillings. So some school kids got together and raised the money and said, Mr. Kipling, we have 25 shillings and we'd like to buy from you your best word. The telegram he sent back, thanks. Thanks was the best word that Rudyard Kipling had. In his book, A Comic Belief Too, Dr. Charles Lowry writes about the woman who asked God to help her appreciate what she has before it forced her to appreciate what she had. And Dr. Lowry went on to say that we need to live a life of thanks living. But this can be harder than it seems sometimes. What happens if somebody's done you wrong? You've been hurt. You've been left out. You are wounded. Somebody made a decision and left you out. Hurtful things are part of life. And maybe this is near to me because of the 5 years where I cried every day when I went home because of the taunts and unkindness of my classmates in middle school and high school. But there is a story that I love to tell that is from Will Rogers. Now, Will Rogers had a big ranch with a lot of cows. Now, cows can be quite ornery. Well, one particular cow had gotten out from Will Rogers and had kind of wandered off. Will had heard that a local farmer had gotten a hold of that cow and had killed the cow. Well, back in that day, if someone had to kill your cow because they were just in the wrong place or they had gotten stuck or something had happened, they were supposed to let the ranch owner know, the person who owned the cow, because that cow could still be eaten if it was dealt with quickly. Well, the ranch owner did not tell Will Rogers, but some other folks did. So Will took his best hand and rode out across the ranch to talk to this farmer. Well, it was cold and the wind was blowing and it was icy. They were riding towards the house and they saw the smoke in a distance, and it was a little tiny house and a little tiny farm. So they went up to the house and knocked on the door, so ready to get out of the cold because they could tell that a storm was coming in. And opening the door was a young mom who was somewhat disheveled and two little children who he could tell were kind of scrawny and thin. They opened the door and they said, "Come in, sir, from out of the cold." And so Will Rogers and his hand brushed off the snow and came in, and she offered with a friendly smile some coffee, and they took it because they were cold. And they looked around the cabin and they saw that it was kind of meager and sparse, and the little kids were maybe a little bit dirty and definitely looked hungry. Well, the little kids' eyes looked at Will and their eyes were shining. And they said, "We're so excited because we get to eat beef this week." And the mother said, "Oh, yes, my husband has a cow and he has decided to kill that cow for us and we are going to eat." Well, Will Rogers and the ranch hand looked at each other because they knew whose cow it was. That cow, of course, was Will's cow. They just drank their coffee and waited their time. And in out of the snow came the farmer. And he said, "Well, here's a little bit of meat from this cow. I couldn't finish butchering it. It's too cold outside." Oh, the children squealed. They were so excited. The weather turned so bad that the family asked if Will Rogers could stay overnight. And he said yes, because he did not want to go out in blizzard conditions. So they enjoyed their time with the family and they ate their meal and they went to bed. They got up early the next morning. Will got up, put on his hat, and headed out. Didn't say a word. The ranch hand kind of looks at him, but no, he didn't say a word. Said goodbye to the family and headed out over the range. Well, after a little while of quiet riding, the ranch hand turned to Will Rogers and said, "That was your cow. Why didn't you say anything?" And Will, in the way that he often did, looked at the man and said, "Well, I decided to trade the cow for some happiness." And that's what he did. That cow was his. He had a right to that cow. It belonged to him. It was wrong for the farmer to kill that cow. That cow did not belong to the farmer. But Will Rogers saw the bigger truth. Now, if you're a teacher and you've taught at a school for longer than a year, I promise you somebody's done something wrong to you. Some of the most difficult things I've ever experienced is just to be misunderstood. Sometimes students misquote you. Sometimes they just target you and just don't like you, and everything you do, nothing you do is right. So we all have those injustices, those cows of ours that have been killed. There are many ways that wrong can be done to us, but there is one right thing that we have to learn to do, and that is to forgive. We have to trade the cow for some happiness. You know, it's said that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and wanting the other person to die. I don't want to do that, but you know, unforgiveness is something we all struggle with. And as I was preparing for this, I was like, you know what? I got to trade the cow. I got to let the cow go and trade it for some happiness. Well, then you say, well, Vicki, you don't understand what's been done to me. And you know what? You're right. I don't understand what's been done to you, nor do you understand what's been done to me. But that's not what it's about. One of my most inspiring authors is Corrie ten Boom, who was a Dutch woman imprisoned for hiding Jews during World War II. She wrote a man who betrayed them and many Dutch people and caused their death. And he was now condemned to death. And she wrote a letter of forgiveness and gave him a New Testament and said she forgave him for what he did. He said, Jesus, when you give that much love in the heart of your followers, there is hope for me. Forgiveness is divine and it's not easy. One time, my late pastor, Michael Catt, talked about a man that he saw on Facebook who had lost his job. And the man said, I am watching and taking names of people who won't help me. Pastor Michael said, you need a forgiving spirit when you've been hurt so you don't permanently write people off. Now, how do we teach these things to children? And how do we talk to them when they've been hurt? Recently, I sat down with Coach Darren Franklin for a conversation about this topic. His full interview will be on a future episode of the 10-Minute Teacher podcast.
Today's guest, Darren Franklin, known as Coach Frank, has over 2 decades of experience in education, athletics, and personal development, and he now owns F42 Empowerment. Coach Frank, this whole issue with gratitude and thankfulness, is this something we can teach this generation as we work with them as coaches, parents, and teachers? Is that possible? And how do we do it?
Yes, we can teach gratitude. One way that we can go about doing that is being consistent as a teacher and understanding the influence that we have on students. What I mean by that, and just to give you a quick example, whenever students borrow something from me, if they don't say anything, I say, well, hey, what happens if somebody gives you something? And they're like, what? I say, what if somebody gives you something? What do you do? And they're confused. But another kid will say thank you. Oh, thank you, coach. Like, don't let them get away. Be consistent, okay? Also, teaching them the value of saying thank you and working with one another as peers, right? How to cultivate those social skills and how to understand just by picking something up for someone. Hey guys, it's time for us to leave. Let's clean up the classroom. I appreciate you guys doing what you need to do today. I'm demonstrating the thank you. I'm demonstrating the gratitude, right? So and hence, hey, I saw 10 people walk over that piece of paper. Somebody pick it up, please. The 11th person will pick it up. Thank you. So I think we need to continue to model it as teachers, right? And find opportunities to be able to do that within your classroom, on the athletic fields, on athletic courts, in the hallways. Find those small opportunities to have students to do something and you model thank you and gratitude.
So as an educator and coach, how does it make you feel when you come across a student who is grateful and says thank you?
It means the world to me. It gives me hope that our future is in good hands. It also gives me motivation and inspires me to keep going. All right. When students write you those notes, I'm quite sure, Vicki, you've had them before, and they tell you thank you for some things that you didn't even think that you did for them. Right. Those are the types of things that I think that our teachers need to be able to just hone in on. And I think our teachers need to better continue to appreciate when those students give you those thank you notes. Save them. As I use this small wins activity, teachers, take a picture of those things. Because when you're having that rough day, that different kind of day, after that bell rings, and you're contemplating if you're coming back, scroll through your pictures and see a thank you note from one of your students.
I need to put mine in my pictures. I have an Atta-Girl drawer where I put those. And, you know, it's not like you want to ask for a present. But I've told students before, and they're just like, oh, Miss Davis, I just want to give you something, and things are tight right now. I'm like, listen, just your appreciation and gratitude. And then sometimes the kids will just write these notes that you're just like, you know, I had no idea. You know, the research shows that if you thank someone who you haven't properly thanked, that it improves your happiness.
That's true.
So helping kids be grateful. You know, I've had kids and said, okay, find somebody at the school that you're thankful for and let's write them a note. And the impact is sometimes bigger on the kid than it is on the person they thank.
I'll give you a quick example also, Vicki. As a head football coach, you have the athletic trainers, right, that offer water and different services to the players of all sports. And I make sure that I used to tell the players, make sure you're telling those trainers thank you, right? That's again, I know I have that influence on those players. They think we just going to learn about football and how to keep getting those wins. Well, I have to make sure you know how to collect some real life wins too. And that's what we're talking about here, just as far as building that gratitude and appreciation. All those things go a long way.
Gratitude and thankfulness is such an element of great human beings. And so as we finish up with this, Coach Frank, What about the kid who just feels like everything's going wrong? Like, why should I be thankful? Everything in my life is a mess. And, there are seasons when we all have really hard stuff, and that can be difficult. What do you do, or how do you coach those kids while still being respectful that they're going through a tough time?
Well, there are a few things I think that we can do. Number one, I share with students, I share with my audiences as I perform speaking engagements. You have two choices every day that you can rise with that sun. Either stay the same or get better. And obviously that's the athletic coach coming out of me, right? You can either stay the same and deal with this current situation, or you can find a way to get better at something. A term that's being used a lot is 1% better. I don't know that students are able to quantify that. But sometimes if you can just smile 3 times in a day, sometimes you can just say hello, that's getting better than what you were before. Okay. Also, sometimes we've heard that tough times don't last, tough people do. Well, it doesn't always mean that you have to be physically tough. Okay. It really just kind of goes back to being able to show up consistently, even on the different days. I don't call them bad days. I call them different days. And on those different days, if you could just show up and find a way to get through that day and see that sunrise again, you have another opportunity to do something different, do something unique and new. And that really does require a lot of toughness. And sometimes just regular students think that they have to be athletes to be tough. No, I just always ask them this question. Do you want to be a representation of a glass that drops on the floor, or do you want to be a representation of a bouncing ball when you drop it? Which one describes you? Because the one you choose shows me your level of toughness. Well, Coach, what do you mean by that? Are you going to shatter like this glass because you're having a different day? Or are you going to bounce back like a rubber ball?
Wow.
Oh, I get it, Coach. I got you. All right, man, let's go.
Because our kids are having tough times these days. A lot of people are having tough times. So just saying, be thankful. I think that's a good metaphor, a good example to help kids when they're struggling. So Darren Franklin, Coach Frank, check out F42 Empowerment. Thanks for talking about thankfulness and gratitude with us today, Coach Frank.
Thank you, Vicki. Enjoyed it. If you guys want to find out more about me, visit us at www.darronfranklin.com. And keep doing what you're doing, teachers. You're making a big difference and a big impact on every kid every day.
In her book, Clippings from My Notebook, Corrie ten Boom said, "Forgiveness is the key that unlocks the door of resentment and the handcuffs of hatred. It is a power that breaks the chains of bitterness and the shackles of selfishness." Our first point is to learn to have gratitude because it can be so good for us and everyone around us. But the second part is that we need to learn the power of forgiveness. It's not always easy, but it's something that is so important for moving forward in life. For me, I was 42 years old when I finally was able to forgive those kids that were so mean to me in middle school. When I'm dealing with middle schoolers, I always talk to them about that. And I tell them not to wait so long to forgive, but also not to be the kind of person that somebody carries with them, because negative things stick to us like Velcro, although we'll forget the kind words in a split second. The third thing I want to talk about is a principle called don't be a pole hitter. Now, this came from Dr. Charles Lowry, the best friend of my late pastor, Michael Catt. And he talked about this in church, and I almost had to leave because I was laughing so hard. So he said that a pole hitter is the kind of person that if you take a bike out in the middle of a field and there is one pole way over in the corner and you say, don't hit that pole, that person ends up hitting that pole. And I saw myself when I got a bike at Christmas, and my mom said I could go out and practice, but not to hit the holly bushes by the house. Well, what did I do? I took off from the top of the driveway. I couldn't stop, and I went right in the holly bushes. I was scratched to pieces. Well, Dad came home from the farm, and he pulled up his truck, and he said, "Girls, I'll come back out and help you with the bike. Just don't hit the back of the truck." Okay, you know what's coming. I went to the top of the driveway
And I got on my bike, and what did I do? I headed straight for the back of the truck and ended up in the back of the truck because I was focusing on what I did not want to hit. Now, every year and for more than 20 years, my family, we go down this river called the Nantahala River. And for about the last 12 to 13 years, we do something called duckies, which means each individual person has to row their own boat. A lot of that was because the kids didn't really want to follow a guide. Well, there's this rock called Turtle Rock, and the whole river goes up under this rock. People have died because they've gotten too close. The river sweeps them under, and then there'll be a stick or something, and then they cannot come out the other side. It's actually a very dangerous place on the river. Well, in the early days of taking my ducky down, the guides would say, see, there's Turtle Rock. Don't go over there. And like the pole hitter I tend to be, I would head straight for the rock. And Kip would be like, Vicki, what are you doing? I'm like, if they just didn't talk about the rock. Well, the last several times I have been down, I don't even know where Turtle Rock is. And I'm like, Kip, I didn't see Turtle Rock. And he's like, that's because they don't point it out anymore. You have to look where you want to go. And if you're looking at the negative, you tend to go there. We all can be pole hitters, but kids can do this. This is why when I teach teachers about classroom management, you never say, don't talk. What you do say, you say, be quiet. Kids should not say, and I realize that I'm saying the not, but I have to for this example, sorry. When a kid is getting ready to take a test, they shouldn't say, don't mess up. They should say, ace the test. When somebody's getting ready to take a shot in basketball or try to kick a field goal or kick in soccer, they shouldn't say, don't miss. They should say, ring it or get it. The problem is the human brain leaves off the word don't. Don't hit that turns into hit that. Don't talk turns into talk. Don't miss turns into miss. Don't mess up turns into mess up. It turns us into pole hitters when we say don't. So turning and looking at the positive of this is what I want to be is much better. To be or not to be, that is the question. Well, what do you want to be? That is the question that I give you. I believe our to-be list comes before our to-do list, and I wrote about that in my book, Do What Matters. What do we want to be? So I actually have a to-be list, and for those of you who are watching on YouTube or television, I've got this list right in front of me, and it has 72 things of what I want to be on it. So the question is, what do you want to be? Not what you don't want to be. What do you want to be? Do you want to be grateful? Do you want to be forgiving? Do you want to be happy? Do you want to be full of joy? Do you want to be around people and learn how to make friends? You can learn that. For those many years I was picked on, a big part of my problem was that I just couldn't read body language. Body language reading has become a hobby of mine, and I've read all kinds of books about learning to read body language. Those things that those kids said about me all those years ago have not come true. And I try not to even repeat those to myself. I'd rather focus on what I want to be. So be grateful, be forgiving, focus on what you want to be. And another thing that we want to be is giving. Longfellow once said, give what you have to someone. It may be better than you dare to think. Many years ago, after the Korean War, where my grandfather had been injured, after he got out of the VA hospital, they went to their farm, and they had a farm in Trussville, Alabama. And my granddaddy and grandmother had 3 kids, and they worked hard and had animals and raised all kinds of different things on their farm. So even though they didn't have a lot of money at the time, they always had food on the table. Well, at that season, there were a lot of people who did not have food on the table. And so Mom would always tell us the story about how they would be halfway through eating and they would be so hungry from working on the farm and milking the cows, but they'd be halfway through eating. And some of you are just going to be grossed out by this, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. Granddaddy would go out front, and when he heard a knock at the door, there would be a family that would be very, very hungry. And they wouldn't have any more food, but Granddaddy would say, push back from the table and give them the rest. And Mom and her brother and her sister, they would push back from the table, get out a clean fork and a clean knife, and whatever was left on their plate, they would give to the family that didn't have anything to eat. They gave what they had. They didn't have a lot, but they pushed back and they gave what they had. In Up from Slavery, Booker T. Washington tells a story about an old woman who came and had grown up her whole life in slavery. And she said, "Mr. Washington, I believe in what you're doing here, and I don't have a lot, but I have these 6 eggs, and I'm going to give them to you to go towards the work that you're doing here." Oh, wow. She gave what she had. So when we look at others, we can give what we have. We can encourage others. I know of people this time of year who pack bags for the homeless and hand them out at the street corners, and they put things like water and snack bars and other things in those bags. There are things that we can do. You can give to food banks. You can help others. You can serve at homeless shelters. You can give 6 eggs. We all have something that we can give. We've talked about being grateful, being forgiving, focusing on what we want to be, and on giving. And these are all definitely things we can do all year long. So how can we teach kids to be grateful? I have some students that say thank you at the end of every single class period. They'll say thank you for teaching. Oh, what that does to my teacher's heart. It's just such a wonderful thing. And I know that that is rare, but you can teach your children just to say thank you at the end of class.
Let's get specific. We can teach children to say thank you and give a compliment. This is episode 839 of the 10-Minute Teacher, 5 ways to give a genuine compliment.
So before we start, we need to discuss what a compliment is and is not and deal with some misconceptions. First, some people think that giving a genuine compliment is a sign of weakness. The research disagrees. In their book, Compelling People, The Hidden Qualities That Make Us Influential, John Neffinger and Matthew Kohut share that in their research, the most compelling people are strong and warm. They quote one of the last speeches that Martin Luther King Jr. gave in Atlanta to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He said, "One of the greatest problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites. What is needed is the realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic." So successful people are strong people who also care warmly about the people around them. Second, some people say it's hard to give compliments because people will let you down. In his book, 9 Things a Leader Must Do, Dr. Henry Cloud says people who succeed in leadership in life do not go around setting scores. They do not ever keep score. They run up the score by doing good to others, even when others do not deserve it. It is the law of love to change things for the better. And Proverbs 12:21 says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by good." Johnny Cash is a well-known singer in the United States who died in 2003. His wife, June Carter, was credited for helping him recover from drug addiction. And she was known as a very complimentary person. At her funeral, Roseanne Cash, Johnny's daughter from his first marriage, said about June, "In her eyes, there were 2 kinds of people in the world, those she knew and loved, and those she didn't know and loved. She looked for the best in everyone. It was her way of life. If you pointed out that a particular person was not totally deserving of her love and might in fact be somewhat of a lout, she would say, 'Well, honey, we just have to lift him up.' She was forever lifting people up." And isn't that a great reputation to have, that kind of person who's always lifting people up? Third, some people say that they don't know what to say. Ludwig van Beethoven was deaf and didn't have a lot of social graces because it was hard to communicate. He had a friend who had a son who died, and Beethoven found out and rushed over to his friend's house, unable to say anything. He goes over to the piano and he pours out his heart for 30 minutes. He gets up and then he leaves. And later on, his friend said that that was the most meaningful visit because Beethoven was genuine and communicated the way that he could. So don't worry about saying the wrong thing. It's the effort that counts. So now that we have talked about that giving genuine compliments is part of being that strong, warm leader. And to be happy in life, we need to give others better than they give us and not be scorekeepers. We need to lift people up. And we need to give a genuine compliment or encouragement in the way that works for us. So now let's talk about 5 ways to make this happen. So first of all, just notice people and make eye contact and be genuine. Pat Williams, the author, said it broke his heart when he found out his sister said that until she met her husband, there was nobody who ever told her she looked nice today. Tell people they look nice. Give a genuine, true compliment about things that you notice that they care about. Thank you for holding the door for me. Thank you for that meal. You know, if we can find something good about every child in our classroom and tell them, or even better, email mom or dad. So put positive comments on a child's report card. But you can also do this with strangers. Track and field athlete Florence Griffith Joyner was known as FloJo and as the fastest woman in the world. She died too young in 1988, but before she died, she told Pat Williams this story that he shared in his book, The Difference You Make, Changing Your World Through the Impact of Your Influence. FloJo told Pat she grew up poor in South Central Los Angeles, but that when she was 8 years old, she met boxing champion Sugar Ray Robinson. She says, Sugar Ray looked me in the eye and he told me, it doesn't matter where you come from, what your color is, or what the odds are against you. All that matters is you have a dream and you commit yourself to that dream. Do that and it will happen. And she says, right then and there, I was sold. I was just 8 years old, but I was all fired up about what my future could be. You see, Sugar Ray Robinson gave 8-year-old Florence the compliment of looking her in the eye, noticing her, and speaking truth and encouragement into her life. My late pastor, Dr. Michael Catt, always said, walk slowly through the crowd because everybody has a hurt. I always want to notice people. And when you're tired or you're busy, it takes extra effort. When you're working really hard in your classroom and then you walk in the hall and those kids are walking by, you have to kind of shift gears and start noticing and complimenting and paying attention to who they are to just give them those genuine compliments that we all need as human beings. Second, I learned this one from my sister, give anonymous surprises. So notice what people like to drink, whether it's a cold soda or a hot tea or a hot coffee. And you get that drink or that soda or that snack and you leave it on their desk anonymously with a Post-it note on it. So you might say to the front receptionist, I notice how you answer the phone so well. Or you might have like a Snicker bar and you say, I think you need a little Snicker. I've been noticing how hard you've been working. The other day, a parent did this for me with just a nice note and prayer on it. And this parent had stapled a little baggie with a chocolate chip cookie in it and put it in my basket. And that meant so much because she wasn't asking for anything in return. So first we notice people and give them a genuine compliment just by paying attention to them even. And second, we give anonymous surprises. So third, write a note or give a text. So when she moved back to our hometown, one of my amazing students, Casey, said, Miss Davis, I really want to thank you for being my teacher. And so she took me to dinner. She was so kind, gave me some really nice compliments that were so encouraging. And as I was talking to her and seeing what all she did, I was like, wow, she's an amazing leader. So I helped nominate her for something called Leadership Georgia. Well, Casey goes to Leadership Georgia. She meets her now husband, and now she actually has a child, all because she stopped to give a compliment to her teacher. And that just meant the world to me. I'm still here doing this podcast and on social media because many years ago, during my spring break, I have battled skin cancer pretty much my whole life. And so I had terrible skin cancer, right eye. And so my right eye was swollen, and I was at home and I was just kind of thinking, you know what? Why am I doing any of this? It's just not worth it. I just need to quit it all. Like I was just thinking that. And then I get a ding that a DM was coming in on Twitter, and it was my pastor, Dr. Michael Catt. And he said, Vicki, I've noticed what you're doing. You are salt and light. You need to keep doing what you're doing and keep sharing and keep helping people. And that changed the course of my life because I did not stop because one person said something kind in that moment. In his book, All It Takes Is a Goal, John Acuff says that he tries to give a text to someone in his life who he admires or respects or appreciates every single day. And you know what? Since I've been doing that, I've gotten so many reconnections, kind of like Casey connected with me. It's just a great way to live your life. So first, slow down and notice. Second, give people anonymous surprises. And third, write a note or a text. Fourth, compliment someone to their boss. Now, waiters and waitresses work hard, and this is something I learned from my mom. She would notice somebody who was working really, really hard, and then at the end of the meal, she would say, would it help you if I complimented you to your manager because you did a great job? And that person will always go, like, first of all, they're shocked, and second, they're trying to figure out what you want. But then when they realize you're real, and you explain that, they will always go get their manager, and the manager will come out. A lot of times their manager is like sheepish and like, oh, do I really want to talk to this person? What do they want from me? And so mom would say, you know, I just wanted to tell you what a great job so-and-so did. They always refilled our tea glass, or whatever it is was the genuine compliment for that person. And so this is something we can also do when a teacher does a great job. Tell the principal, you know, when your child's teacher does a great job, because, you know, they may like a compliment from you, but if you tell their principal, now the principal gets to go give their teacher a compliment, and you have blessed the principal and the teacher, because principals need and want positive things to tell to their teachers. And in a world full of negative, we need to do that. And, you know, we can also do this with our students. Now, the fifth may seem something odd, but it's compliment yourself. So I always tell my students, if a person said to you what you often say to yourself, you would not be friends with that person. Our self-talk is so important. So I have a celebrate playlist that when I finish working out, play it. And I look in the mirror and I say, Vicki, you did a good job. You worked out. And then I play the celebrate playlist. In John Maxwell's book, How Successful People Grow, 15 Ways to Get Ahead in Life, he says, if we want to change our lives, we have to change the way we think of ourselves. If we want to change the way we think of ourselves, we have to change the way we talk to ourselves. If we talk negatively to ourselves, how are we going to become a more positive person? When you do something awesome, celebrate, compliment yourself, look in the mirror, tell yourself you did a good job. Get good at celebrating. So when I was 50, my sisters and I celebrated by me learning to run a half marathon. When I crossed that finish line, you better believe my hands went up. I get the medal. We're taking pictures, celebrating. I was so happy. Our habits make us who we are. And we need to celebrate those little habits. When you send a text to compliment someone, when you compliment that waiter or that colleague or that student, celebrate those moments, because you are putting more love and more light and more goodness into the world when you do that.
I want my students and children to have a grateful spirit and to be genuinely thankful for the things that they have in their life. And it starts by being genuinely thankful for them. When you are at your holidays, your children should say thank you for the food that's prepared for them. It might not be their favorite, but they should stop and they should say thank you. Now, I grew up in the day where the adults went first and the children went last. I do think wherever possible, that's a great message to send. Now, you should never force a kid to kiss or hug somebody that they are not comfortable doing that with. That's not a good thing to do. But saying thank you is something that every child can do. Now, the last thing I'd like to talk about is for those of us who are missing people. My mom died from dementia in 2020, and there are times that I have struggled with going down the road of getting depressed. Now, I would encourage you that if you have true depression, that you get help. And sometimes you need medication, and that is perfectly okay. But I want to tell you some of the advice that my mom and my grandmother gave me. Many years ago, my grandfather died at a very young age, at 55, from a heart attack. And my grandmother, when she got a little older, she decided to take each of the grandkids on a trip. So I was the oldest grandchild, so she took me to Alaska when I was in 8th grade. Trip of a lifetime for 2 weeks with my grandmother. Well, grandmother and I stayed up late because the sun never went down, and we talked and we talked, and we watched old episodes of Murder, She Wrote, which is why I still love Murder, She Wrote. And grandmother said, Vicki, one day, you're going to lose somebody and they're going to die, and you're going to think that you can't make it. And here's my advice. For that first year, you take one foot and put it in front of the other. Any big decisions, just put one foot in front of the other, get up and handle each day one at a time. And then sometime after that first year, maybe 2, but definitely after the first year, you're going to wake up and you're going to decide that you can live. And then you do. And I've held on to that. I held on to that when I lost Granny. I held on to that when Mom has passed, and for the many people that I love that have passed and gone. And that has been good advice. So I try to have context of where am I in the grieving process. Mama also said if you want to have a pity party and you send invitations, you're the only one who's going to come. So don't have one. She would also say if you want to take a guilt trip, you got to pack your own bags because nobody's going on the trip with you. And which was a great quote for me, because I always felt like I had to cook a homemade nice meal for my children. Or I thought I had to give all these presents. Well, sometimes we just couldn't afford giving a whole bunch of presents. And so I would have to know that my mom's advice that she always gave me in May, remember, Vicki, your kids would rather have a sandwich or pizza with a happy mom than a gourmet meal with a witch. So I had to learn to not have that guilt trip and not have those pity parties that I would have. As we finish up, remember, I am at the center of my attitude. I can choose. I can make choices of what I want to be. I can forgive. I can be forgiving. I can be loving. I can be kind. If there's something I don't know how to be, I can learn how to be that if necessary. But my biggest hope and prayer for you is that the only turkey at your Thanksgiving will be the one on the table. Thank you for listening to Cool Cat Teacher Talk, episode 10, talking about gratitude. You can see the show notes at coolcatteacher.com/talk gratitude. You can go to coolcatteacher.com/newsletter and subscribe to my weekly newsletter for educators, and go to YouTube and look for Cool Cat Teacher and subscribe to this show and my podcast, the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. Thanks for listening.
Stay in the loop. Visit coolcatteacher.com. See you later, educators.
Thanks for tuning in and listening to what matters in the classroom. This is Cool Cat Teacher Talk.